Okay, so today in the latest installment of reading from the Parinama Method cover to cover, we are in the 7th hub, chapter 10, and we are reading this section on page 254, Patterns and Fractals. So this one, I'm hoping this one's going to kind of be be an easy lift here. So I'm going to get right into it here and we'll see what comes up. One thing probably worth mentioning is this is also alluded to in chapter 3, but let's get into it. Okay, so patterns and fractals. Okay, feeling lonely, anxious, or overwhelmed is synonymous with feeling disconnected and lost. Turning to people and pets can help to restore a sense of connection. And for people who don't feel like being around others and don't have access to animals, this connection can be restored through the natural world. No matter how hard we work to build the boundary between our relationship with nature, we are born, we live, and we die by it. Our bodies are made of the same organic material as all living matter. Yet we're often encouraged to politely hide or dissociate from the corporal realities of our bodies. Our bodies are a temporary phenomenon that go through phases, cycles, and stages, similar to everything else in nature. We're linked to these patterns and cycles by the food we eat, the air we breathe, the seasonal changes of temperature, weather patterns, and the 29.5-day cycle of the moon. The complete cycle of our life is birth through death, which has a specific directionality that isn't necessarily linear, but fits in and synchronizes with the patterns and cycles of our ancestors. If you feel disconnected, anxious, and overwhelmed, reconnect by creating inner space with time spent in nature, recognizing the patterns of your life and reflecting in the phenomenon surrounding you, and feel how deeply connected and immersed you are in all of it. As I discussed in chapter 9, there are specific patterns in nature that repeat: branching, spirals, waves, packing. That's the repeating geometric shapes like honeycomb. And explosion. By the way, an example of explosion is like a flower. Oh, yeah. Spoiler alert. The explosion pattern is seen in flowers, snowflakes, and starbursts. Our own branching circulatory system extends into the outer reaches of our body. We see similar patterns in the roots of trees, in the vasculature of leaves, and even in the bifurcated branches extending from a trunk. So I'm going to read that again. Our own branching circulatory system extends into the outer reaches of our body. We see similar patterns in the roots of trees, in the vasculature of leaves, and even in the bifurcated branches extending from a trunk. Nature not only reflects our bodies, but also our minds. Like a spiral and the ever-expanding chambers of a nautilus shell, we regularly encounter similar challenges throughout life that increase in magnitude as we continue to solve them. Often, after thinking we've resolved the issue forever, we get a similar challenge with increased complexity. This is very frustrating if we're inclined towards polarity and believing that once a problem gets solved, it goes away forever. They rarely do, and we can get perplexed by the whack-a-mole nature of life as things constantly arise. There is no changing this, but we can change our expectations and relationship with it. I mean, one thing this is pointing back to is in the early videos, the static videos here on this channel, like one of the first topics that I made just sort of a standalone was really about changing the relationship with discomfort. Yeah. Yeah, because it's like the fantasy of resolution, the fantasy that it's like there's this state that we can attain where all our problems are solved and we're at this sustained, like, like state of like either being like happy or like the absence of problems. Um, it's not the transcendence is not that. The transcendence is not that there's no more problems. There's no more bad feelings. There's no more sadness. There's no more, it's like that's not what happens. That's not, and that fantasy of that relief is actually more closely mirrored by dissociation, which is detaching from the feeling of aliveness, of life. But I describe the feeling as having something that's a lot more similar to being able to like hold large, difficult feelings without becoming absorbed by them. So to be able to feel them and sustain the staying with that feeling, um, I guess it's a form of a detachment. I guess it's like discernment or like, there's like some Buddhist word for it, but that it is like that's like the skillfulness with it. It's not the minimizing, it's not the avoiding, it's not the like absence. It's that it still is there, but that it's really part of life and experienced as so. Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, like, the notion that breakthroughs and the insights that perhaps we're looking for to understand more deeply ourselves and our lives and come to understand our purpose, come to connect with, maybe like, even like a notion of divinity and God is like it's not through euphoria. It's not like, through this singular path of euphoria and the aversion of difficult feelings. It literally creates a reduction in capacity when we're talking about the second hub and emotional and feeling, and it's so important that we build this capacity out, that like the greater capacity we have for all feeling difficult and wonderful, because this is also about expanding the capacity for wonder and awe. But it's kind of like we keep it ourselves in a spectrum. If we're in like very strong avoidance of negative bad feelings, then one of the issues of that is that we have like there's sort of like the counter in terms of like positive feelings and how much is available for us to feel there. So anyhow, whatever. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this? So fractals are a series of simple patterns that repeat and magnify to create a magnificent, larger arrangement that looks like a big version of the small pieces it contains. See Chapter 9. It's also Chapter 3, I'm fairly certain. A fractal is never-ending and infinitely complex. The configuration is self-similar across different scales. When we look closely at the more prominent pattern, we discover the smaller patterns within. When you feel overwhelmed, Know that you're in a pattern, and instead of focusing on the feeling of being lost, allow it to unfold and show itself. Hindsight always reveals the existence of this familiarity. So while you're overwhelmed, trust the process. You've been here with this feeling before, and it ended. It will happen again. Challenges simply increase in size as you grow, so wait for it. The clarity will come. If you feel disconnected and anxious, again, try to get yourself into nature and give yourself a little time. Yeah. This hub, I will say, like, practicing in this hub is the hardest for me because it is, um because of the amount of space in it, and just, like, being a person of, like, I guess, the modern world, it's like the doing part. Like, this is really absent of action in a sense. It's almost action through like, sort of a form of surrender. It's like the action is non-inaction, like, in a way, like, it's to be, like, to create the stillness, to create the space. Like, I'm currently struggling against it. I'm really like, I'm having a hard time with silence right now. And even when I was writing the book, this stage of the creative process, which we'll get into in chapter 12, this stage was really hard for me because it's not the it's like the antithesis of, like, the density of, like, the physical matter of the first step. It's like there's just it's sort of like it's absence. It's the space. It's space. Like, it's just it's like and I remember when I was writing the book, I was having a really hard time with this part of the process, which was to just sit. I spent a lot of time just, like, sitting. I guess, like, people call it meditating. And it's interesting because right now I remember it was so uncomfortable. It was, like, the time in the process where I felt the most, like, almost defensive in a sense, I guess I would say. Like, there's all like, a defensiveness that was just a projection about my own, like, discomfort about, like, producing nothing. This is actually kinda good for me to talk about, yeah. And so one of the things that I did was, people, when folks will reach out to me about consulting, in their revenue organizations, I'm as a rule, typically not super interested in doing it. Um, but I started saying yes because it was like I just really like I think now in retrospect, I think it was part of I think I was like, I'd like actually doing something. I like having some kind of like concrete action in my life versus just this kind of inquiry, this state of just creating this like expansiveness for and with questions. It's like it's uncomfortable. That's why, which is probably why it's so uncommon to spend time in it. Why most ideas are actually like ideas that already exist with sort of a modification, versus kind of really opening up to something potentially completely new and like almost like decontextualized. But yeah, but I think I actually now in retrospect, I think a lot of what I was doing is like going back to things that I was like respected and good at but it wound up being so dense. It was this counterforce that actually like took away from the process of creation. Like, it actually was like the existence in one state and the other, like, really. And so I'd made the decision to completely stop anything other than working on Parinama Method, and it was like, I think it was like March of 2020, like, where I ended all my engagements. It was like literally, like, I think, like, on the Friday, that, like, 13th Friday, that I, like, got on a train in Cambridge and left and headed home. I was like, "All right, we're going in. We're going into the cave." And then turns out the whole world went into a cave. So, yeah. Okay, so that's it for today. The next reading is Wonder and Awe, and then we have Sense of Humor. These are really nice. Like, they're really, even the quality I have when I'm like reading it, there's just a different feeling with it. It's a lot. It's like slower. It's a little buzzier. It's like, in terms of like this, like a low sort of gentle hum. The intensity isn't there. It's just, it like there's just another quality being in this part of the book. That's very Seventh Hub. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So yeah, so we've got a couple nice sections to go. And so anyway, yeah. So as always, comments, of course, I will answer I will answer them. Um, yeah. And thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I think this is the 301. So there's a lot of these. We've read the entire book almost. So, and it's intended to be a companion for a reader. So you're not reading each of these sections alone. Yeah, which is why I put the page numbers in the descriptions of the lives. And yeah, so yeah, there's that. I do them every day. And I'll say again, if you have a comment or a question or like a note, or something you just want to share that you don't want to put in a public comment, you can reach out to me at the Parinama Method on Instagram and DM me. And hopefully I'll find it. Okay, anyway, I'm sending you a lot of love and appreciation, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye for now.